Just a few years ago, many experts believed China's AI ambitions would collapse without Nvidia. After years of US sanctions, Huawei was expected to fall behind. In fact, many analysts believed the company would never recover. Losing access to cutting-edge chips, advanced manufacturing, and key American technologies seemed like the beginning of the end. But today, the exact opposite seems to be happening. Chinese companies are increasingly turning to Huawei's AI chips instead of Nvidia's. Billions of dollars are being invested into domestic AI infrastructure, and one of the world's biggest technology companies is slowly losing its grip on the Chinese market. That raises a question that almost nobody imagined asking just a few years ago. Could Huawei actually replace Nvidia in China? And if that's possible, what does it mean for the future of artificial intelligence? To answer that question, we first need to understand how Nvidia became one of the most powerful companies in the world and why China depended on it in the first place. Today, Nvidia is almost impossible to ignore. Its market value has reached trillions of dollars, making it one of the most valuable companies on Earth. Governments follow its announcements, investors watch every earnings report, and nearly every major AI company depends on its technology. But Nvidia didn't start as an AI company. When it was founded in 1993 by Jensen Huang, Chris Malachowski, and Curtis Preem, the company's mission was much simpler: build graphics processors for video games. Back then, very few people imagined that graphics cards would one day become the foundation of artificial intelligence. For years, Nvidia competed with companies like ATI, which would later become part of AMD. The focus was gaming. Faster graphics, better visuals, and more powerful GPUs. Then something unexpected happened. Researchers discovered that GPUs weren't just excellent at rendering video games. They were also incredibly good at performing thousands of mathematical calculations simultaneously. And that's exactly what artificial intelligence needs. Unlike traditional CPUs, which are optimized for sequential tasks, GPUs can process enormous amounts of data in parallel. That makes them perfect for training neural networks. At first, this discovery seemed like a niche academic advantage. But Nvidia saw something bigger. Instead of treating AI as a side business, the company invested heavily in software. And that decision would change everything. If you ask most people why Nvidia dominates artificial intelligence, they'll probably answer: because their chips are the fastest. That's only part of the story. The real reason is something called CUDA. CUDA is Nvidia's software platform that allows developers to program GPUs for complex computing tasks. Over nearly 2 decades, universities, startups, research labs, and technology companies built their AI software around CUDA. Thousands of tools, libraries, optimization techniques, and machine learning frameworks became deeply connected to Nvidia's ecosystem. This created a massive advantage. Imagine learning to drive using only one type of car for 15 years. Then one day someone gives you a different vehicle with completely different controls. Even if that new car is fast, switching isn't easy. That's exactly the challenge companies face when moving away from Nvidia. The hardware matters, but the software ecosystem matters even more. This is why many experts believed Nvidia's position was practically untouchable. Even if another company produced competitive chips, developers would still have to rewrite software, retrain engineers, and redesign entire AI infrastructures. For years, that seemed almost impossible. Everything changed in late 2022. When OpenAI launched ChatGPT, artificial intelligence suddenly became the biggest technology trend in the world. Governments wanted AI. Startups wanted AI. Banks wanted AI. Factories wanted AI. Hospitals wanted AI. Everyone wanted AI. And every company needed exactly the same thing: computing power. Suddenly, Nvidia wasn't simply selling graphics cards anymore. It was selling the engines powering the most important technological revolution of the century. Demand exploded. Companies rushed to buy H100 GPUs faster than Nvidia could manufacture them. Waiting lists stretched for months. Prices skyrocketed. Entire data centers were built around Nvidia hardware. The company became so dominant that some analysts described it as selling the new oil of the digital age. Whoever controlled AI chips could influence the future of artificial intelligence itself. But while Silicon Valley celebrated this new era, another story was unfolding on the other side of the Pacific. A story that would eventually threaten Nvidia's dominance inside one of the world's largest technology markets. China. China wasn't simply buying Nvidia chips because they were popular. It needed them. Companies like Alibaba, Tencent, ByteDance, Baidu, and countless AI startups relied heavily on Nvidia GPUs to train increasingly sophisticated AI models. The country's ambitions were enormous. China wanted to become a global leader in artificial intelligence. Its companies were investing billions into cloud computing, autonomous driving, robotics, medical AI, and advanced manufacturing. All of those industries required enormous amounts of computing power. And for years, Nvidia was the obvious choice. If you walked into a Chinese AI data center before the export restrictions, there was a good chance you would find rows and rows of Nvidia accelerators running around the clock. The relationship benefited both sides. Chinese companies received world-class hardware. Nvidia gained access to one of the largest technology markets on the planet. For a while, it seemed like the perfect partnership, but politics would soon change everything. Because the growing competition between the United States and China wasn't just about trade anymore. It was becoming a battle over technology, and artificial intelligence had suddenly become one of the most valuable strategic assets in the world. The question was no longer who could build the fastest chips. The question was, who would control the future of AI? If Nvidia's rise was one of the greatest success stories in modern technology, Huawei's fall was one of the biggest shocks. For years, Huawei had become the face of China's technological ambitions. It wasn't just another smartphone company. It built telecommunications equipment used across the globe, designed its own processors, invested billions into research, and was rapidly becoming one of the most influential technology companies in the world. By 2019, Huawei had even surpassed Apple in smartphone shipments and was on track to challenge Samsung for the #1 position worldwide. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. Then, almost overnight, everything changed. In May 2019, the United States placed Huawei on the Entity List. To many people, this looked like just another political headline inside the technology industry. However, everyone understood the consequences. American companies could no longer freely sell technology to Huawei without government approval. At first glance, that might not sound catastrophic, but think about what a modern technology company actually needs. Processors, software, electronic design tools, memory, operating systems, advanced manufacturing equipment, licenses, intellectual property. Many of those critical technologies came directly or indirectly from American companies, and suddenly, access to them became uncertain. For Huawei, this wasn't simply another business challenge. It was an existential crisis. Within months, the company lost access to Google's mobile services for its smartphones. Its advanced Kirin processors became increasingly difficult to manufacture because leading foundries relied on American technology. Suppliers became cautious. Partners became uncertain. Investors questioned whether Huawei could survive. Around the world, headlines appeared predicting the company's decline. Some analysts even described Huawei as a company with no future. Looking back today, those predictions seem surprisingly premature. Most people focused on Huawei's smartphones. That was understandable. Consumers could immediately see the impact. Phones lost Google services. International sales declined. Market share dropped dramatically outside China. But inside Huawei, something else was happening. Instead of trying to win back the smartphone market immediately, the company quietly redirected enormous amounts of money toward areas that most consumers would never notice. Artificial intelligence, cloud computing, enterprise infrastructure, semiconductors, advanced networking. These weren't glamorous businesses. They didn't generate flashy headlines, but they represented something much more important: the future. Huawei understood something that many people underestimated. Smartphones come and go. Artificial intelligence could redefine entire industries. If the company wanted to survive long-term, It needed to become much more than a phone manufacturer. It needed to become the foundation of China's AI ecosystem. That transformation wouldn't happen overnight. It would take years. But while much of the world believed Huawei was simply trying to recover, the company was quietly preparing for a completely different battle. The sanctions didn't just change Huawei. They changed China's entire approach to technology. For decades, Chinese companies had benefited from global supply chains. If Nvidia made the best AI chips, Chinese companies bought Nvidia. If ASML built the best lithography machines, Chinese chip makers wanted ASML. If TSMC manufactured the world's most advanced processors, Chinese designers relied on TSMC. It was efficient, it was profitable, and it worked until politics entered the equation. The restrictions showed something that Beijing could no longer ignore. A country could spend billions developing artificial intelligence. But if another country controlled access to the hardware, that entire strategy could be disrupted almost instantly. From China's perspective, this wasn't just about Huawei anymore. It was about technological independence. And once that realization spread across government agencies and major technology companies, investment priorities began to change. Instead of asking, what's the best chip available? The new question became, what's the best chip we can build ourselves? That single change in mindset would reshape China's AI industry over the following years. Despite the sanctions, Huawei still possessed something incredibly valuable: talent. The company employed tens of thousands of engineers. Many of them had spent years designing advanced processors through Huawei's semiconductor division, HiSilicon. Although manufacturing became more difficult under export controls, knowledge didn't disappear. Experience didn't disappear. Engineering talent didn't disappear. Huawei simply redirected those resources. Instead of competing primarily in smartphones, the company started building technologies for data centers, cloud computing, and artificial intelligence. That shift wasn't obvious to consumers. But inside the industry, people were paying attention. Engineers noticed increasing investment in Huawei's Ascend AI processors. Researchers began experimenting with Huawei's software ecosystem. Universities started exploring alternatives to CUDA. Slowly, very slowly, an entirely new ecosystem began to emerge. It wasn't as mature as Nvidia's. It wasn't as powerful. Not yet. But for the first time, Chinese companies had something they hadn't possessed before: a realistic domestic alternative. Nvidia continued breaking records. Its revenue exploded. Its market capitalization reached extraordinary levels. Investors believed the company had an almost unbreakable competitive advantage. And globally, they were largely right. But inside China, something different was happening. Huawei wasn't trying to beat Nvidia everywhere. It only needed to win one market: its home market. That distinction is incredibly important. China doesn't need Huawei to replace Nvidia worldwide. It only needs Huawei to become good enough for Chinese companies to choose domestic hardware over imported alternatives. And according to multiple reports, that's exactly what is beginning to happen. Major Chinese technology firms, including ByteDance and Alibaba, have reportedly tested Huawei's latest AI chips and planned significant orders after improvements in software compatibility and inference performance. If true, that represents a major turning point. Because once the largest AI companies begin building around domestic hardware, switching becomes easier for everyone else. And that creates a chain reaction, one that Nvidia can no longer ignore. By 2023, something remarkable was beginning to happen. For years, most people assumed Huawei was simply trying to survive. But behind closed doors, the company had been working on something far more ambitious. It wasn't trying to rebuild its smartphone business. It wasn't trying to compete with Apple. And it wasn't trying to return to where it had been before the sanctions. Huawei was preparing for the next technological revolution: artificial intelligence. And unlike smartphones, the AI industry was still in its early stages. That meant one thing: the race wasn't over. It was only just beginning. When most people hear the word Huawei, they immediately think of smartphones. Very few people know about Ascend. Yet, Ascend may become one of the most important products in Huawei's history. Unlike Nvidia's GeForce graphics cards, which were originally designed for gaming before becoming AI powerhouses, Huawei's Ascend processors were built with artificial intelligence in mind. Their purpose wasn't to render video games. Their purpose was to train AI models, run inference, power cloud services, and eventually become the foundation of China's AI infrastructure. At first, few companies paid attention. Why would they? Nvidia already dominated the market. CUDA had become the industry standard. Switching platforms looked expensive, risky, and unnecessary. But then something unexpected happened. Nvidia became harder to buy. Imagine you're building a massive AI company. You have billions of dollars, thousands of engineers, a world-class research team. You know exactly which chips you want, but you can't buy enough of them. That was the reality many Chinese companies faced. Even before the strictest export controls, demand for Nvidia hardware had exploded worldwide. After the restrictions, obtaining the most advanced AI chips became even more complicated. Some companies had to redesign entire projects. Others delayed expansion plans. Some started looking for alternatives. Not because they wanted to, because they had to. And in moments like these, an alternative doesn't need to be perfect. It only needs to be good enough. Huawei understood this perfectly. Instead of promising to beat Nvidia overnight, the company focused on something much more realistic. Be available. Be reliable. Keep improving. Sometimes, availability is more valuable than absolute performance, especially when you're building data centers that require tens of thousands of processors. One mistake people often make is thinking this battle is simply about chips. It isn't. The real battle is about ecosystems. Think about Apple. People don't buy only the iPhone. They buy the App Store, iCloud, the Apple Watch, AirPods, MacBooks. Everything works together. Huawei is trying to achieve something similar in AI. The company isn't just selling processors. It's building servers, networking equipment, cloud infrastructure, software tools, AI development platforms, management systems, energy solutions for data centers, and technical support. This matters because large companies don't want dozens of suppliers. They prefer complete solutions. If Huawei can provide everything from the processor to the networking hardware, switching becomes much easier. This strategy also gives Huawei another advantage. It controls more of the system. Instead of optimizing only one chip, it can optimize the entire data center. That can significantly improve efficiency. And efficiency matters. Training large AI models consumes enormous amounts of electricity. Saving even a few percent can translate into millions of dollars over time. However, there's still one enormous obstacle standing in Huawei's way: software. This is where Nvidia remains incredibly difficult to challenge. Over the last 20 years, developers around the world have built millions of lines of code using CUDA. Researchers know it. Universities teach it. Companies depend on it. Changing that isn't as simple as replacing one processor with another. Imagine replacing the operating system on every computer inside a multinational company. Technically possible? Yes. Easy? Not at all. Huawei knows this. That's why it has spent years developing its own software ecosystem. The goal isn't necessarily to copy CUDA. The goal is to make switching easier. Every update, every new developer tool, every compatibility improvement reduces the cost of moving away from Nvidia. It's a slow process, but ecosystems are built over years, not months. One of the clearest signs that Huawei's strategy is working comes from China's largest technology companies. Businesses that once relied almost entirely on Nvidia hardware are now testing domestic alternatives. Not because Nvidia suddenly became a bad company. As China's largest technology companies continue testing and deploying domestic AI hardware, one question remains: can Huawei actually replace Nvidia? The answer isn't as simple as many headlines suggest. If we look at raw performance alone, Nvidia still holds a significant advantage. Its newest AI accelerators remain among the most powerful chips ever built. The CUDA ecosystem is still the industry standard, and thousands of companies around the world continue investing billions into Nvidia-based infrastructure. In many ways, Nvidia is still the king of artificial intelligence. But that doesn't necessarily mean Huawei has to beat Nvidia everywhere. It only needs to win where it matters most: China. And that's exactly where the balance of power is beginning to change. Many people imagine technological competition like a boxing match. One winner, one loser. Reality is far more complicated. Huawei doesn't need to replace Nvidia in Silicon Valley. It doesn't need to dominate Europe. It doesn't need every AI startup in the world to use Ascend processors. Its objective is much more strategic. Provide China with an independent AI ecosystem, one that cannot be interrupted by sanctions, one that allows Chinese companies to continue building advanced artificial intelligence regardless of geopolitical tensions. From that perspective, Huawei's mission looks very different. The company isn't simply trying to sell chips. It's helping build technological independence. And for Beijing, that objective may be even more important than profits. Now imagine what happens if Huawei succeeds. The first companies switch. Developers begin optimizing their software. Universities start teaching the new platform. Cloud providers invest in compatible infrastructure. Hardware manufacturers build products around it. A domestic ecosystem begins to mature. Then another company joins, and another. Eventually, momentum starts to build. History has shown that once an ecosystem reaches critical mass, it becomes much harder to stop. We've seen this before. Android challenged established mobile platforms. Cloud computing replaced traditional servers. Streaming overtook physical media. Technological transitions rarely happen overnight. They happen gradually. Then suddenly, if Huawei continues improving its hardware and software while Chinese companies keep investing in domestic AI, the next 5 years could reshape the industry's competitive landscape. Perhaps the most important lesson isn't about Huawei or Nvidia. It's about how quickly the technology industry can change. Just a few years ago, most people believed China would remain dependent on foreign AI hardware for decades. Today, domestic alternatives are improving faster than many expected. At the same time, Nvidia continues pushing the boundaries of what's possible. This means the AI race is no longer dominated by a single company. It's becoming a competition between entire ecosystems. One centered around Silicon Valley, the other increasingly centered around China. Both are investing hundreds of billions of dollars. Both are racing to build faster chips, better software, larger data centers, and more capable artificial intelligence. The winner won't simply sell more processors. The winner could shape the future of AI itself. When Huawei was placed under US sanctions, many believed the company had reached its end. Its smartphone business declined. Access to advanced manufacturing became more difficult. Some analysts predicted Huawei would slowly disappear from the global technology stage. Instead, the company changed direction. Rather than trying to return to the past, Huawei invested in what it believed would define the future: artificial intelligence. Today, its Ascend processors are no longer experimental products. They are becoming part of China's broader strategy to build an AI ecosystem that relies less on foreign technology. Will Huawei completely replace Nvidia? Probably not, at least not in the near future. Nvidia remains the global leader in AI hardware, and its technological advantages are still enormous. But that's no longer the most interesting question. The real question is this: can China build an AI industry that no longer depends on Nvidia? If the answer is yes, then we're not just watching a battle between two companies. We're watching the beginning of a technological shift that could redefine the balance of power in artificial intelligence for decades to come. And whether you're an investor, an engineer, or simply someone fascinated by technology, that's a story worth paying attention to. The AI race is moving faster than ever, and the balance of power is changing before our eyes. Whether Huawei can truly replace Nvidia or not, one thing is certain: the competition is only just beginning. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to stay updated on the latest developments in AI, semiconductors, and China's technological rise, Make sure to subscribe to Chip Wars and turn on notifications so you never miss our next documentary. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.